Hello everyone, in this tutorial we're going to take our textures that we created in Substance Painter and export them for use in Unreal Engine 4. In Unreal, we are also going to explore recreating our material, setting up a lighting solution, and playing with post-processing effects and setting up our camera and rendering out a high-resolution screenshot. So let's go ahead and get started. So first in Substance Painter, we need to export our texture maps. And to do that, it's pretty easy. We go to File, Export Textures, and we want to make sure we select the Unreal Engine 4 packed for our configuration. Before we do that, it's important you make sure that your normal map is going to export in the correct format. So to double check, we go to Edit Project Configuration, and under Project Settings where it says Normal Map Format, you want to make sure it's set to DirectX, and then we'll hit OK. So if you do find issues with your normal map in the Unreal Engine, that might be something you just want to check before you export it. Alright, so let's go to Export Textures, and I should have named my Lambert, my texture set from something other than Lambert, but that's okay. So we do have our base color, we have our occlusion, roughness, and metalness map all packed into one image, and we'll explore that in more detail a little bit later. And we have our normal map and our emissive map. Okay, so we'll hit export, set your destination. So this is where we can set our destination. I already exported these, so I'm good to go. I'm going to export them in 2K resolution, and I'll hit export. So once we get our maps, you should see something like this, and those are all the maps we needed. So if we go over to the Epic Games Launcher, let's go ahead and launch Unreal Engine. And I'm using 4.22.3. But pretty much this process is going to be the same for a lot of the newer versions. Okay, so I will click on New Project, and I don't want any starter content for this one, and we'll just call this one Demo, and I'll create the project. It's going to take a second to initialize. And here we go. So the first thing I'm going to do is we could start building our stuff in here. I'm going to start with a completely blank scene, and then we'll build up some of these objects and see why and how we use them and why they're important. So I'll go to File, New Level, and an empty level, and we're just in this black void, which is what we want for now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to re-import my low poly object. So in Unreal, this is our content browser, and when you're creating a game, especially with a lot of different assets and stuff, you really want to make sure you're organized and you're using folders and you're organizing things. And I'm going to be pretty sloppy just because we're doing a simple asset and we're just rendering it. But just know you'd want to like be more organized than how I'm going to be. So yeah. Let's import our low poly X, and I'll just drag it in from my Windows Explorer, and I'll just hit import. And you can see it brings in not only the object but the material. So let's go ahead and drag our object in our scene. Okay. So we have our X just floating around in space. So what I want to do, actually before we set up the material, because we are in a black void, is I do want to set up a basic environment so we can get some lighting information onto our X object. So the first thing I'm going to do is let's go to Visual Effects. Oops, sorry. Let's go to Lights, and let's grab our Skylight. And notice how it's still black. That's because we got to link some stuff into our Skylight. So let me import. So from HDRIHaven.com, I got a free spherical map. So the one I'm using is The Sky is on Fire, 2K resolution. So I'm just going to drag that map into my content browser. I have my Skylight selected, and I'm going to go to source type and switch it to SLS specified cube map. And I can just drag this in here. And you can see now that's lighting my object. It doesn't fill the environment. It's not like projected into the environment, but it is providing light to the scene, which is what we want. Something else I want to do is in Unreal, we actually have to make a reflection capture that in order to see reflections from this environment map. So what I'm going to do is go to Visual Effects, Sphere Reflection Capture, just drag that in my scene. And I should be a little bit more organized in my world outliner. Let's, it's fine, we're not going to have too many objects. So in my reflection capture too, if I want that same exact map, I have to plug in this spherical map. So I'll go to specified cube map in my sphere reflection capture, and I will drag it in here. And really, we don't see what's going on because this material isn't very reflective. But what I'm going to do is it says here, reflection capture needs to be rebuilt. So under the build tab, I'm going to click this arrow, and I am going to build reflection capture. Okay, and then that warning goes away. So if I select my object and hit F, I can focus on it. Okay. Now, what I want to do is I could probably start building my material now. Just real quick, just so we're not staring at a black void for now, I'll probably like hide or delete this. But what we can do, a couple things actually before we jump into the materials. What I can do is add a, should be visual effects. I can add like an atmosphere fog, and so that does that. Now this isn't the same kind of lighting that's in that spherical map we plugged in. But yeah, so that's something you could do. I don't think I'm actually going to use that, so I'm going to delete it. But what I do want is this post-processing volume, and by default, Unreal Engine has this auto exposure that's kind of nice if you're creating a game and you go inside, the exposure goes down or increases so you can see the detail in the shadows a bit more. But I don't want a dynamic exposure. I just want it to be a consistent number so that I can really dial in my lighting. So what I'm going to do is create this post-processing volume, and then in this post-processing volume, I am going to look for where it says exposure. One thing I do need to do is, this is a bounding box, and by default, it will only affect the things in this box. So since this is a simple enough scene, I'm actually just going to make it so it affects the entire level. So I will scroll down in my post-process volume, and I will hit infinite extent or unbounded. So that way it's affecting my whole scene. Now I will go to... Okay, I will go back up to my exposure, and minimum and maximum EV I'll check. I'll just set this to 0.5 and 0.5. Okay, so now you can see the lighting is, oops, I accidentally duplicated my volume, so let's delete that duplicate. So now you can see The lighting is a little bit more balanced. It's not as blown out because we dialed in that exposure. Okay, so now with that basic kind of environment and lighting setup, we can go ahead and start playing with our materials. Oh, one last thing I am going to do is I'm just going to drag in this backdrop item that I made. Oops, and it's all the way in here. There we go. And something like that's going to be okay for now. So I've seen some people do this cool technique too, where they use like that atmosphere or exponential height fog, and they use that as their background, and maybe they'll just have like a plane on the ground. But I'm used to like having a backdrop in Maya anyway, so I'm just gonna utilize that same kind of technique that I'm more familiar with. All right, now we can get into the material. All right, so I am gonna be a little bit organized and create a new folder and call this one texture maps. And in this folder, I'm just going to select all those maps and drag them in. If I double click my X object in its details, I have that material that's assigned to it, Lambert 1. So I'm going to double click that, and it brings up that material's properties in a new window. So I'm going to delete this vector parameter node. I don't need that because I'm going to plug in a diffuse map. And let's kind of position this where we can see the X. So yeah, and the reason why this looks pink is just because my environment map is like a dusk setting, and these two materials are white, so that's why they're getting this pink hue to it. But we'll tweak it a little bit later. So now what I'm going to do is, before I start dragging these in here, something that you need to make sure you do is your occlusion roughness metalness map. Double click it, and it will open that image in this editor. And what we want to do is set it to make sure you uncheck sRGB. So I'll uncheck that. Or else you'll get weird results in your reflections if you don't do that. So you want to do that, and we'll hit save. And I can close that out. So real quick, since we're already on the subject, let's take a look at what's going on, just in case you're not familiar with channel packing. So I opened that image that we kicked out of Substance Painter in Photoshop, and this is what it looks like. It looks kind of crazy, but what's happening is, since the ambient occlusion, the roughness, and the metalness are grayscale images, there's no color information, we can pack each one of those into a single channel of our image. So red channel, this is our ambient occlusion map. Green channel, this is our roughness map. And blue channel, this is our metalness map. And so it's really an effective way to compact 3 different texture maps into one. So we're not wasting, because if we would have saved the metalness map, for example, as its own like JPEG or image file, well, you have wasted information in the other 2 channels, right? So it's just eating up space for no reason. So we can be more efficient with the textures by packing them into channels. And then when you, obviously the reason why it looks like this is because you're combining information in the blue with information in the green with information in the red. So that's why it looks weird, and we don't use this one. But yeah, oops, bring everything back. So that's channel packing. Okay, so let me click here to bring this up, and I'm going to drag in my normal map first. Make sure that's looking good. So I'll take this RGB and plug it into the normal parameter of our material. And I can see, I'm going to rotate the X this way. And I'll hit apply and save. Oops. It's hard to tell because it's black now because we deleted that vector parameter. So if I just type in vector, plug it back into base color just so we can see what's going on. Oops. Double click. Okay, we can see that normal map in our we can see the normal map affecting our material now. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is drag in the diffuse map since it's easy. Plug it in to base color. And we can wait until we plug them all in, but I typically just apply them at least so I can make sure it's looking pretty okay. And now the tricky one, our packed map. So what I'm going to do is, if you don't know, you can go to Photoshop or you can look at the documentation. But as we can see here, red is going to be our ambient occlusion. So I'm going to take red plugged into our AO. Green should be our roughness. And blue should be our metallic. So I'm going to go ahead and hit apply and save. Boom. Okay. All right, so it's looking really dark. Let's step back out a directory here. So let's go to here. So I just went out of that texture map folder. And this material is the one that's assigned to our backdrop. I'm just going to make this darker. And I'm actually going to, so I'll right click, type in vector, grab this vector parameter, and I want to make it so it's a little bit rough, so the reflections are a bit more blurred. So we're making it rougher by increasing the value, something like that. Apply and save. All right. Oops, did that not? Ah, that's okay. So we can go into our skylight, and we can play with the intensity. Oops. But it's like really touchy. So if I type in like 2, it'll be 2 times brighter. But I really think 1 is okay for us. Let's see. Oh, something we need to do. This is probably why the lighting is kind of being weird, because we have to rebuild the lighting. But if we just set this to movable, so set the skylight to movable. The reflection capture, I don't think we have to set that, but the 2 objects will set to movable and post-processing. So now you can see we don't have to rebuild the lighting, which is nice for changing stuff on the fly. And again, if you're making a game, yes, you'd want to do light baking and rebuild the lighting. But since we're just doing a one-off of a really simple object, we can afford to have dynamic lighting and whatnot. So now if I go back here and I change this to 2, like, yeah, we can see it's updating and the reflections are being captured more so in real time. All right, so now what I'm going to do, now that we got our material set up, let's dive into the lighting a little bit, because typically you don't want to just rely on the environment for your lighting. Okay, So right now, all I'm doing is I'm kind of setting up the axe in a more interesting pose. Maybe what I'll do is scale this up. There we go. That crease was kind of getting annoying. And boom. So what I'm going to do is hit this arrow right here, and I can go to bookmarks, set a bookmark, and I'll hit 1. But let me just dial it in just a little bit more before I do that. There we go. So now I'll go to the arrow, bookmark, set bookmark, hit 1. So now if I'm like doing something off into space here, I can hit 1 on the keyboard and it will go right back to that view. So we'll set up a camera later, but I think that's the minimum we need so we can start like placing lighting and getting back to this spot. All right, so setting up lighting. So we'll go to our lights and we have directional light, a point light that's like an omni light, and we have a spotlight. We already set up our skylight so we could get some basic illumination. Let's go ahead and do a direct light, I think, for like our fill light. And we'll just drag it in our scene. Oops. So I keep going to the wrong way just because it's like the pan is inverted from Maya. So if that gets too annoying, like it is for me right now, I'm going to hit this arrow, advanced settings, viewports, and I want to invert the middle mouse pan. And now I should stumble around my scene a little bit less. Alright, so let's F to, oops, select the axe, F to focus. There we go. Right now, I'm just playing with this directional light. I don't want the shadow to really be seen from our camera. So something I need to do too is this is a stationary light, so I need to set it to movable, and then we'll get better real-time results. But honestly, this isn't looking too bad. We can tweak the color. So I think I want this one to be a little bit cooler. Light. Or maybe it's warmer. Let's do... We'll do cooler. And if it's too bright, what we can do is play with the intensity. So maybe we'll do 0.5. Wait. No, indirect intensity. Leave that to 1. You want intensity. So it's set to 10 lux. Let's do 5. And something like that's not too bad. So I'm going to hit 1. So I can see our shadows like peaking. So let's go ahead and kind of try to play with the directional light so it's hiding the shadow. Something else we could do as well is just bring this up. So if I hit 1, shadow's still there, but it's not as bad. I think what I want to do is just tweak the directional light, see if we can, or maybe we play with the camera. There we go. I had the right idea the first time. I was just pushing in the wrong direction. Just move that backdrop back a little bit. There we go. So 1. Okay. Where was I? So we were playing with this light. I think that's good. Let's add a rim light. And we could do like a key fill light. I think the environment is doing a pretty good job of acting as our fill light. That environment skylight we created. So let's do a spotlight now. Drag this in our scene. And if the snapping ever gets too annoying, or you find you're moving the camera around too fast, we can dial the camera speed down a little bit. And this is useful if we have big environments we're working with in a game. We want a faster camera speed, right, to be able to get to places quicker. But for something this small, I tend to take that camera speed down. And when I'm positioning cameras and lights, I like to turn that snap off. Sometimes I'll keep angle snap, but the move tool I don't want to have snapping. Okay, let's do get up a little bit more. Okay, so in this light, let's just increase the intensity. Oops, again, let's set it to movable. And I need this attenuation radius to encompass it. Okay. Now I can start playing with the intensity, and I'm getting this really nice highlight on the rim of my object. We can make this warmer or cooler. Ooh, that green's cool. I think I want it to be warmer since I had my other light be cool. We'll do this one a warmer. And I'll hit 1. Go back to my shot. And oh man, I think if we had one more light, maybe a really cool light kind of hitting here, that could really aid us. I think there's a way to like create a light based on your camera view, or you can go into the light view and like move it, but I don't really do that too much. I should probably. Let's do another spotlight. Drag it in. Set it to movable. I'm going to hit 1. Increase the intensity. And we'll give this one, we did warm, so we'll give this one a cooler color for sure. Trying to not be too extreme, but sometimes the extremes give really nice results. Alright. So I think the lighting definitely could be tweaked a lot more to be a bit more improved. But for a couple minutes, that's not too bad. But yeah, so hopefully you can see, like, you can go in and start playing with the lights and stuff. Now what I want to do... Yeah, I actually like those blues and purples we're getting in the axe blade. That's pretty nice. So now what I can do is I can start setting up a camera, playing with some of the post-processing effects and that post-process volume, and then kick out a high-resolution image. So let's go ahead, and what we can do is, if we like this view, we can do hit the arrow in our viewport, create camera here, create camera actor, and it creates a nice camera here. So I'm going to pin this just so if I select something out here, it keeps this camera actor view up. So you can see I can move objects a little bit. I can also go into my camera actor and I can play with like field of view. So right now it's 90, we could do like 35. Maybe we track the camera back a little bit. But we'll do maybe like 60. There we go. I'm just fine-tuning that camera composition a bit more. Okay. And I think that's looking pretty good. Once you get it kind of dialed in this camera actor mini preview, what we can do is we can go to the camera view. So if you hit perspective and select your camera actor, it will show this. And if you want to get out of that view, you can just hit this eject button. Okay. So we have our camera set up. Let's look at some post-processing stuff. Post-processing volume. So we already dialed in and like locked the exposure, right? We can play with things like bloom, method. We can do standard, intensity. So we can play with the bloom, threshold. So we can really dial the bloom in, and you want to be subtle with a lot of these post-processing effects. We have depth of field, so I can turn on method. We can do Gaussian depth of field. This one is going to be tricky because it's like at a shallow plane, but we can do focal distance and try to dial it in. Depth blur radius. Oops, nope. We could do max bulk and size, near and far. So it's gonna be, like I said, this acts is in a relatively shallow depth of field. So dialing these in could be a little bit tricky. There we go. So like it's just about coming in here and trying to tweak these values. So yeah, you can see like since this is angled slightly closer to the camera up front, and this is angled back, I'm just trying to fine tune this far value. So you can see we can get a depth of field there. But honestly, it's not looking that good. So this would just need some more fine tuning. So I'm just going to turn depth of field off for this example. But that's definitely one of the a popular setting that people play with. Cool one is chromatic abrasion. Again, you don't want to go too crazy with this, but you can basically start splitting the channels, and usually chromatic abrasion is like camera artifacting in the lens, like the corners of the lens or the outer rim of the lens, and a lot of photographers actually try to fight chromatic abrasion. So adding a little bit, if you can get on the edges of your image, can actually make your can make it look a little bit more realistic by incorporating some of those imperfections of the camera lens. So dirt mask is another popular one. We can plug in a map and we can get like camera dirt. Lens flares. This is another one that is oftentimes played with. So you can see if I increase it, we're starting to get lenses on our object from reflections. So yeah, a lot of cool post-processing things to play with. Again, just keep them simple. We have color correction. So yeah, lots of different things. We scroll down. So some other cool ones, we can play with like ambient occlusion. And this one, I don't know if it's going to be as apparent, but kind of hard to tell with the color. I'd probably play with this with a grayscale. But yeah, we can play with that. GI, motion blur if you have movement, reflections. You can start playing with some like ray trace stuff. But yeah, so those post processing, excuse me, those post processing effects are there for you to explore. So in my camera, I'm gonna make, so 1.77, that should be 16:9 aspect ratio. So for width, I want to do a 4K image. And if I hit F9 and then click this right here, that will open where I took that screenshot. And you can see here, it's not actually 4K. So that's a good, hitting F9 is a good way to get like some quick captures. I think if we hit F11, it'll make this bigger. And you can see our grid's also in there. So if we hit G, G, that hides all our GUI elements in the scene. Let me hit F11 and let me exit the camera. So if I hit G, you can see it's hiding like all those kind of icons for our cameras, our lights, our reflections and stuff. So let's go back into our camera. So I'll do perspective, camera actor, hit F11 and F9, and let's see if that gives us a, it does give us a larger one, but it's still kind of based on like our screen size. So another way is if we hit the tilde, hit F, wait, I think we can be in this one, hit tilde, there we go. That brings up our console, and I can type in high res shot. And if I hit 2 after that, if I type in a 2 after that, hit enter, it will take a high-res screenshot that's 2 times the resolution of the screenshot that it was. So now I can see this is a larger image. Oops, this is the wrong one. This one's the right one. There we go. So now I can see this is at 100%. It's a higher resolution image. Okay, so that is pretty cool, and that's how I would kick out screenshots. I don't like how boring the background is. So let's a couple more things. Let's just go in here. Let's go into the parameter and let's tweak. Let's give it some personality, just a little bit. I'm just kind of playing around, seeing what works best. I'm playing with those cool colors, since our lights were primarily cool, except for that rim light. Okay, something like that. Apply and save. Okay. Last thing I want to show is this cool the emissive map. So if I go back into my textures, or let's select our axe, double click the material, so it opens this up. So I didn't plug in my emissive map, so let me eject from the camera so I can rotate. You can see what's going on here. And just so we can start seeing, and turn off a light so it gets darker. So I'm going to drag my emissive channel, and simply what we can do is just plug that RGB value into the emissive color. save, and apply, and you can see it's lighting up. But we lack the control to make this brighter. So what we do is we set up a really basic no network. And all we're going to do is right click, type in multiply, grab that multiply node, and what we're going to do is plug the emissive map into the A channel on our multiply, and take our multiply and plug that into the emissive slot. And we don't want this, so control click. And now what we have is we have the map multiplied by a constant. And if we bump this up, you can see it's like really making that brighter. So let's do something like 60. Let's do 120. Just want something that's gonna be. Yeah, you see how that's okay. So if we hit apply and save, so you can see, and again, that's linked to the bloom post-processing effect. So if we tweak the bloom, we can like fine-tune that. But you're getting a really cool emissive material. So that's probably too strong if we wanted to keep like the bloom, if it was looking good for our other areas of the X. So what I do, 120, let's take this like to 75 maybe. Apply, save. And yeah, I think that's looking really cool. So that is how we would do the emissive stuff. Okay. So yeah, hopefully you guys did find this tutorial helpful though, and you got a better understanding of how you can bring assets into Unreal and set up basic lighting and camera solutions and kick out a nice high resolution image from Unreal. It's always good to have your artwork in engine and display that it looks good in engine. So hopefully, like I said, you guys found this helpful, and I will see you guys next time.